I started working for Nottinghamshire County Council back in 2018 when I was successful in applying to its graduate development programme. I then became a public health and commissioning manager. Anybody who's interested in applying to the graduate development programme, I would strongly suggest that you do so. The 2 years is designed to develop and further both your skills but also your career aspirations, so that you can embed this and move forward following the completion of the programme. I was also given the opportunity to actually consult with our residents and work with local charities, which I really enjoyed, and I found it a really important and worthwhile experience. So right now I work in supporting our Health and Wellbeing Board in Nottinghamshire, and I would definitely say that the grad scheme was really crucial in my success in applying for this position, but also the support network that was in place. You know, I'd had placement managers and I had a mentor who I was able to discuss and start to reflect on what my career aspirations might be and identify that public health was an area that I was interested in. Nottinghamshire County Council has been a really good organisation to work for and that I continue to work for. So I would strongly suggest to all of those who are interested to apply to the graduate development programme this year.
You'll be as pleased as I am that as we move through March, the days are getting longer and we're starting to see a bit of spring coming through and some warmer days. And with that, it's fantastic, isn't it, to be able to get outside a little bit more and to enjoy the open air. But it's really important that as we do that, that we also keep in mind all of the measures that are in place in this very first step of the roadmap. It allows for us to meet up with one other person for recreational activities outdoors. But it's really important that even as we do that, we keep in mind all of the social distancing measures which are so important. The reason they're important is that there is no shortcut we can take to the end of the roadmap. There is still quite a long way to travel, and during that time we need to make sure that the rates in Nottinghamshire come down further. You can play your part in that by sticking to the rules at each step of the roadmap. You'll be as pleased as I am that as we move through March, the days are getting longer and we're starting to see a bit of spring coming through and some warmer days. And with that, it's fantastic, isn't it, to be able to get outside a little bit more and to enjoy the open air. But it's really important that as we do that, that we also keep in mind all of the measures that are in place in this very first step of the roadmap. It allows for us to meet up with one other person for recreational activities outdoors. But it's really important that even as we do that, we keep in mind all of the social distancing measures, which are so important.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christine Goldstraw and I'm the chair of the Nottinghamshire Police and Crime Panel. Can I welcome everyone to today's meeting, which is being held remotely, broadcast live over YouTube and recorded in line with the requirements of the Coronavirus Act 2020. Please do bear with us if we run into any technical difficulties today. The meeting will be adjourned temporarily if the live stream is broken at any point. In addition to myself, the panel members participating today are Vice Chair Councillor David Ellis, independent co-opted members Leslie Dalby, Suma Harding and Bob Vaughan-Newton, and our elected members, Councillor Michael Edwards of Nottingham City Council, who's substituting for Councillor Khan. Councillor Scott Carlton has sent apologies. Councillor Tony Eaton of Bassett Law District Council, Councillor Rob Inglis of Rushcliffe Borough Council, Councillor Richard McRae of Broxtowe Borough Council, Councillor Francis Purdue Horan of Nottinghamshire County Council, and Councillor Helen Smith of Ashfield District Council. We do expect Mayor Abrahams of Mansfield to join us, but he's sent apologies, he might be a few minutes late. As well as the elected members, we also have in attendance Mr. Paddy Tipping, the Police and Crime Commissioner, Ms Emma Foodie, Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner, Craig Guilford, the Chief Constable, and Kevin Dennis, the Chief Executive of the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner. And the panel's support officers this afternoon are Keith Ford, Joe Toomey and Peter Barker. Welcome everyone, one and all. Can I just point out that if you don't have the raise your hand facility to help to indicate when you wish to speak, please shout up if you're in danger of being passed over without having had your say. So if everyone can hear, then thank you very much. Perhaps we can move then to the minutes of the last meeting held on the 4th of February 2021. Can the minutes of the last meeting be agreed as a true and accurate record, please? I'll take nods as... Thank you. Right, thank you. I think I saw Councillor Ellis put his hand up, and I think we've got a couple of others.
No, Councillor Woodings has got her indicating.
Ah, that doesn't. Thank you. Sorry, Linda.
Sorry, Chair. My name shows on a separate page to everyone else's.
Yes.
If you could register my attendance, please, I'd be very grateful. Thank you.
Yes, I had spotted you seem to have dropped off the page. Thank you. Well, is that possible to do that, or is it just the amount of material on the page? I think she's worried that she didn't get her attendance recorded because it was dropped off onto a separate page in the paper minutes. Yeah. That's correct. I've understood that correct, Linda.
Sorry, it was just while you were reading out those attendees at this meeting. I think because I was alphabetically at the bottom.
Yeah, and it's on the other page.
It's on the second page.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm here today.
So we need to record that you were here. We know you're here, loud and clear. Who else is waiting, Joe? Thank you, Councillor McRae. I can see you now. Thank you.
Yeah, hi there. I just need to abstain on this set of minutes because I was not at the last meeting because I don't know if you saw it in all the papers, our system got hacked and I couldn't log in, but our staff are pretty good and we're back in again now, so here we are.
Well, welcome back. Thank you. And I can see Mr. Bob Vaughan-Newton waving at me.
I think when you ran through the list of other people apart from the members, you might have missed Rachel Barber.
I think I probably did, and my apologies to Rachel because I know she's on the line. Thank you. Well, we're doing a good start, aren't we? Thank you very much. If we can move then to item 3, declarations of interest by members and officers. Does any member have any disclosable pecuniary interest to declare? No? Okay. Councillor Ellis, I think you wish to come in at this point.
Thank you, Chair. I'm advised by the Monetary Office I needn't declare this, but in the interest of transparency, I note as a private and non-pecuniary interest that Paddy Tippings asked me to act as his agent in the forthcoming election. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ellis. Anyone else have either any private interests or other non-pecuniary issues to disclose at this point? I don't see any other hands. Thank you. If we can move then to item 4, the work programme. Prior to handing over to Joe Toomey to introduce the item, I would just like to formally move the recommendation which the Vice Chair will second.
Formally second, reserve the right to speak. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Joe, if I can ask you to lead us through the work programme.
Thank you. Today's work programme report, very similar to ones you've received in the past. The first part of the report covers the work programme itself, which has been updated since the last meeting to reflect the new reporting arrangements that were agreed. Recommendation 2 in the report relates to the establishment of a working group to write this year's annual report, seeking volunteers to support the Chair and Vice Chair in the preparation of that document for presentation to the panel at its meeting in September. Finally, we've also brought to you within this report the proposed meeting dates for the 2021-22 municipal year, which we're asking panel members to agree today.
Thank you very much, Joe. I'll pause at this moment. I've noticed that 1 or 2 people I think we're having a slight technical issue, so I'll just make sure everyone can hear. I think everyone's okay now. Any questions or comments to Joe? As some members will recall, last year was the first time we presented an annual report, and the process seemed to work very well, and we had quite a number of good comments back from the content. So we thought if that system worked, we should do it again the same way. And I think anyone who's interested, Joe, could just drop you an email. Is that correct? That would be okay for you. Any other questions to Joe? I can see Mr. Bob Vaughan Newton has got his hand raised.
I was only going to volunteer myself for the annual report group, but if we're doing it by email, I'll do it by email.
Well, thank you anyway, Bob. One willing volunteer is always worthy of note. Thank you. Councillor Woodings, is your... No, it's not you. Let me look. Is there anybody else? No. Well, you have a number of recommendations there, 3 in fact. Can those recommendations be agreed, please? In that case, if there are no votes against or no abstentions, thank you. That motion is carried. That takes us to item 5, an important document, the update on domestic abuse, the helpline and the Police and Crime Commissioner's position paper. Commissioner, good afternoon. Can I hand the floor over to you?
You can, Christine, but
Perhaps, sorry, my sound has gone. Just a second. That's it. I can hear you now. Before handing over, can I formally... Sorry, I'm just having... It's all right. I think I've got the sound back again. Prior to handing over to you, can I invite the Vice Chair to formally move the recommendation, please?
Formally move and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you very much. Commissioner, over to your good self. Thank you.
So very briefly, Christine, I'm going to ask Emma to introduce this item, but I'd just make 2 points. First of all, the figures in the report for Nottinghamshire are almost exactly mirrored by the figures nationally. So we're running in sync with the national trends. And secondly, I hope we'll be in a position to announce within the next few days further support for third sector organisations in working with domestic abuse. That work is well underway. We've had significant support from the Ministry of Justice, and we're all keen to make progress. I'd be a lot keener if we could bill these sums of money into the base rather than bidding on a yearly basis, but we are where we are, and on that point I'll hand straight over to Emma.
Thanks, Paddy. Afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Thank you. You'll recall last year the panel asked for additional information around the current response to domestic abuse across Nottingham and Nottinghamshire, and that was undertaken by the Office of the PCC in the domestic abuse position paper that was put together. And a particular thank you to Dan and Nicola from this office for their efforts in pulling that all together. And the paper was a really comprehensive summary of the whole system's approach to domestic abuse, from prevention work right through to criminal justice outcomes. And the contents of the report have obviously been reported to the panel previously, so I don't propose that I'm going to go through them all again now. But I do think it's worth just reiterating that the paper demonstrated that the current position in our area is a strong one, and that the ecosystem that exists of support available across the county and city is a very sophisticated one, developed both in terms of the services and the commission services and the way in which they work together, and also the way commissioners work together in pulling that together as well. And that's been further confirmed actually through the visit that we had from the Domestic Abuse Commissioner earlier this year, and subsequently in further conversations that have taken place with the VRU and the Home Office earlier this year in recent meetings. But even so, whilst we're pleased that that's the position, we're always keen to be better and to respond to any challenges that might be outstanding or developing in this particular area. And with that in mind, we put together an action plan of how we might take this work forward, how we might continue to deliver some of the work that we currently do, and how we might build on that which needs to be expanded. And I thought I would just pull out a few examples of how we've been able to take those actions forward. Within the papers, you can obviously see particular actions and the progress that we've made against each one. But the domestic abuse car, for example, launches this week, an initiative which involves having a domestic abuse worker teamed with a police officer, providing cover at key times in key areas to allow us to provide that really early intervention support for someone who's been in touch with the police, and to help support stronger criminal justice outcomes as a consequence of that. And that's something which has been really successfully piloted and rolled out in areas such as West Yorkshire, and that's something that we hope to do the same in Nottinghamshire. In addition is our work supported by Craig and the force with medium risk victims of abuse, whereby we're seeking to again further build on those satisfaction rates, make sure that victims, when they're in touch, are getting the best support at the earliest point, and that we're providing that real wraparound care that we can at an early point. In addition, initiatives which have been piloted and supported last year by the VRU, such as the work done with Juno Women's Aid around supporting children who've witnessed incidents of abuse in the home with a knife, that's been further funded for another year, which is really positive. And again, I know this has been brought up at the panel before, but at the back end of last year, we were successful in bidding for matched funding for a perpetrator programme, which we've developed and is actually going to be receiving its first cohort imminently at the start of next month. We know that there remains pressure on our services as a result of COVID, yes, but also that we've seen that increase of pressure year on year. And additional funding Paddy's talked about already. We managed to receive additional funding that we secured from the MOJ last year to deal with those pressures. Additional rounds of funding have been announced and we're in the process of bidding with those, and we are expecting decisions to be made imminently. I think exactly as Paddy has said and has been fed back to us through services as well, though, what we would really appreciate is longer term secure funding, which allows us to provide some certainty and some long term planning around these services would be something which would be really welcome. But we are where we are as it stands at the moment. Additionally, further note in the pack that's been provided is around the helpline, which was requested at the last police and crime panel, which just provides some further information on the current demand that we're seeing for this service and where that's coming from, and trying to get a bit under the skin, if you like, as to who's reaching out for these support services at the moment. The helpline, of course, is commissioned not just by the OPCC, but in conjunction with the City and the County Council. It's a free phone number which provides support not only to survivors, but also for frontline professionals, that they can access support and advice for people they might be working with as well. Demand for the helpline has been going up year on year, and the last year was no exception to that. When lockdown was introduced, demand actually went down to begin with before increasing and being significantly higher than usual as lockdown began to lift. And those increases were broadly similar in the city and county of just over 60% at the time. In terms of reported crime, recorded crime went down at the point of the initial lockdown, and again it came back up as restrictions started to be eased. Again, at the point of restrictions being brought back in at the back end of last year, when we were going into tier 3 and the additional lockdowns that we saw at that point, again we saw reporting go down. So it would be reasonable to expect that as we see restrictions start to lift again in the current weeks, that there may be an increase in reported crime at that point as well. In terms of unique callers, as we've mentioned, the helpline isn't solely for survivors in terms of those who are accessing the support. Calls from professionals over the last year has really increased quite significantly, and you can see a breakdown as to which professionals it is that are getting in touch with the service and trying to seek support at that point. The other thing that you can also see in the report is the profile of the support which is being sought, and that has broadly stayed quite similar compared to previous years, even with the increase in volume. So whilst we know that the demand for the helpline remains significant, it remains under strain, and we know that the difficulties that we've seen in the last year, not just through the additional calls that have been received, but due to the fact that those who are taking those calls are actually taking them now, not from an office environment, they're taking it home with them. They're having to take these calls, you know, in the privacy of their own home, whilst dealing with all the things that we've all been dealing with at home at the same time. And these can be quite difficult calls that we're talking about here. So it does remain really challenging. But as ever, we're committed, along with our commissioning partners, to continue supporting this vital service in whatever way we possibly can. And I'm happy to take any comments or questions at this point.
Thank you very much. Thank you for a very full explanation there. I'm just trying to see, I know a hand's gone up, but it's not on my screen. So if you could just advise. Oh, Councillor Ellis, I can see it now.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to Anne for the report. And I'm pleased to see the progress towards a whole systems approach and strategy on violence against women and girls and women. This might be slightly off centre here, but over the weekend there's been a lot of coverage about harmful sexual behaviour in schools and the work that everyone's invited has been doing, and excuse me, and the Commission for Social Justice report that Sajid David produced. I just wonder if you want to comment on whether there are any specific services, any particular arrangements for school age students, or whether it's something we ought to be thinking more of. Thank you.
So, David, it's Paddy. It's on the agenda for a discussion with the Chief Constable tomorrow. I'm concerned about this. As you know, we already have police officers in school. There's been some controversy about that with a recent report. Simon Bailey, the Chief Constable in Norfolk, has been leading on this. The police will be operating their own helpline, building on the helpline that's been set up by the third sector, and we'll be in a position to come forward with some proposals fairly soon. But it links into the wider debate about the way that women and girls are treated in our community, and if you'll bear with me, I'll say something about that later on.
Thank you very much. We've got Councillor Woodings next, please.
Thank you, Chair. I will come on to the report that's been produced because it is a very helpful insight into the picture of what happened last year. But I want to start by actually saying that following the murder of Sarah Everard and the increased focus about the cultural misogyny within society and the abuse and violence that women face on a day-by-day basis, it never seemed more pertinent, actually, that we should be discussing this at the Police and Crime Commissioners panel. And I think I want to start by saying how proud I was to be from Nottinghamshire, because we got a huge amount of publicity that we are effectively, as a county, way ahead of the rest of the country, identifying misogyny as a hate crime and measuring it and tackling it as such as well. And I just want to say, for anyone who thinks that we only collate the statistics, I can tell you that I'm in a women's running group, and I know for a fact that when drivers have gone past groups of our runners outside of lockdown and called out abuse to our runners, our women runners, their number plates have been reported to the Notts Police and follow-up action has been taken. So I just really want to start by saying, you know, congratulations on being ahead of the game and actually being way ahead of the rest of the country as identifying street harassment and misogyny of women as a huge cause of crime in this country. But even if it doesn't reach criminal justice standard, it affects the lives of women and girls across this country. And I think the Everyone Included report, it was, to be honest, just a damning indictment that we have a severe cultural issue in this country with the way that women and girls are perceived. On relation to the statistics, I asked for this more detailed report only because on the face of the statistics that were presented previously, it was clear there'd been an increase in calls to the helpline, but not a commensurate increase in police action on the back of that. And it's very interesting that there's been an increase in calls from professionals who are no doubt seeking help for women themselves. So although the statistics are really insightful and helpful, I don't know that they actually tell us whether the crimes have increased or decreased, or whether the instances have increased or decreased. The anecdotal evidence we hear from all the articles and women is that women were more at risk in 2020 because they were locked down with their abusers. But that obviously hasn't fallen through into police charging. And I think a further analysis of the possible reluctance of women to come forward to the criminal justice system is part and parcel of what needs to happen to the root and branch change in British society about the acceptance and tolerance level of women, but also their reluctance to come forward to the police and what the barriers to actually women coming forward to the police to report things might be as well. It was very interesting, the reports about professionals calling through. I'm a trade union officer and I have called through twice to the helpline myself to seek help for my union members, but an increase in calls from professionals seeking referrals. And the other thing I wanted to specifically pull out was that under the action plan, and first of all, when do we think the violence against women and girls policy will actually be refreshed? Because it says the end of March, and you know, we're coming towards that time period. It talks about expanding the use of DVPOs, specifically by increasing the number of DVPNs. And DVPOs are what I know as go orders, which is where a perpetrator is ordered to leave a property for a period of, I think it's up to 28 days, to give the person who has suffered abuse a bit of breathing space and time to think and gather their thoughts. But I just wanted a bit more meat on the bones about what exactly, you know, what exactly the problem is with actually issuing those, and how you're looking to expand the issuing of DVPNs as a way of protecting women. If you could just come back on those points, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Woodings, and thank you for your initial comments at the beginning in terms of where Nottinghamshire sits in this particular difficult situation. I'll go back to the Commissioner first, because there are a number of strands that you raised, and I'm sure he'll probably want support from one or two of his team, but I'll go back to the Commissioner first for any comments.
Well, just let me make one initial comment, and then Emma will flesh this out. I'm very proud of the misogyny work that was undertaken in Nottinghamshire. Very proud that the former Chief Constable Sue Fish is still working on this and is a very part-time member of my team. But I really want to put the praise where it really belongs, which is this initiative came first from the Women's Centre in Nottingham, supported by then Nottingham citizens. Nottingham Trent University have worked really hard with us as well. And as Linda has rightly said, it's about changing the culture, it's about changing the attitude. The reality is that very few people have gone to court around this, but actually anything that makes women feel and girls feel safer and stronger in our streets, I think is really important. And you've heard me say this before, but the death of Stephen Lawrence, the Macpherson report, was a seminal moment, as I think will George Floyd's death be. And I think the death of Sarah Everard will prove to be another touchstone for moving forward. But I'll pass on to Emma if that's okay, Christine.
Thank you very much, Commissioner.
Thanks, Paddy. Thanks, Linda. So just to come back on a few of those points, really. I mean, you mentioned about the work that the force has done on misogyny, and as you mentioned, that was a force first. You know, we were the first force in the country to be able to take that forward, which we shouldn't forget. But I would just also flag that the work that the government's committed to is a pilot, and they are going to keep an eye on the numbers of that. So I think that it is something we do need to keep an eye on, and something that we need to encourage others again to report on, so that we can start to get a really accurate reflection as to what's happening, and to make sure that it is not just a pilot, it is extended beyond that. But I think it also feeds into the work that again is highlighted within the report, the original report around a whole systems approach, and the need for the prevention activity which we do in our schools. And we're able to do that being supported by partners such as the City Council and the County Council. But it's so important that we have those really early conversations with young people, age appropriately, as to what's acceptable in relationships and what they should expect from the relationships that they have in their lives. As you mentioned, the helpline serves that multiple function of being a support service there, not just for survivors to be able to access directly that perhaps don't want to contact the police, but for those professionals as well who are in contact with those survivors and want to be able to better support them and best placed to do so. I'm happy to have a conversation further offline if there's further information, further stats which we might be able to pull out, which perhaps will answer some of the questions that have been left open for you as a consequence of the reports that have been produced. The other thing which I did just want to mention was around VOG. Our VOG strategy was actually published on Saturday, and it's available on the website. It is a strategy, so it is a high-level document with regards to kind of our thinking and our approach to these issues. What we'll do to follow up with it is with partners is put together an action plan, and the intention is for the actions that are still outstanding from the domestic abuse report to be subsumed into that one action plan to be taken forward. forward subsequently. And then just with regards to DVPOs and DVPNs, I didn't know whether Craig wanted to say a word on this, as I know that they've been doing a lot of work in force on it.
Thanks, Emma. Yeah, just picking up on that point, Linda. DVPOs, DVPNs are orders that we have to go to the Magistrates Court for. So our legal services department do that. So usually a superintendent kicks that process off 24/7, and then we send our team to the court to obviously try and secure one of those orders. I'm always a little bit sceptical of some of those applications, because I'm anxious to ensure that it isn't an excuse for the CPS not to make a decision, if you know what I mean. So first and foremost, I want the situation to be held in the criminal justice arena rather than a sort of almost a secondary approach. So I'm careful around the numbers of those, but I think overall what you'll see is the numbers will increase steadily over time, but they won't go in any crazy sort of format.
Thank you very much. Councillor Edwards, I think you've been waiting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I live in the city centre, so I happen to be at the 2-minute silence for Sarah Everard, and it was a very moving moment. And I have to say, again, respect to the police and all associated who are paying proper respect to those kind of events, and allowing them to happen when perhaps other places got into a bit of a muddle over that. So I think Notts did very well to let that vigil take place. I was a bit confused with one aspect of the report, which put an emphasis on ability to report as some kind of factor in understanding what was going on vis-a-vis relative rates of domestic violence in the city and the county. And I just thought a bigger point that should always be made, as I understand the situation, is that the rates of domestic violence and abuse are associated with social and economic disadvantage. And I wondered if there was an understanding as to whether either Nottingham or Nottinghamshire, whether it has the kind of rates of domestic abuse you might expect given its deprivation, or whether it did better than the deprivation might suggest based on national figures, or did worse. I just wondered if we understood what the relative degree of problems are in Nottingham and Nottinghamshire compared to the country, given the poverty there is in the city and elsewhere. Thank you.
Commissioner, do you want to come back on that, or Emma?
Thanks, Christine. So apologies, because I think there's a point in the report which perhaps it's worth clarifying, in that where we kind of make reference to the marked increase in reporting within the city in, I think it's Q4 of 2019 to 20, and our kind of expectation that these are due to awareness ranging activities. What we've actually seen is a widening of the gap between reports in the city and the county, where there's significantly less awareness raising activities taking place in the county comparative to that which has taken place in the city. So it's not so much about that there's whilst there's kind of, you would naturally expect prevalence to be higher potentially in a more deprived area of the city, whilst also the county for that matter, it's the widening of the gap to which the kind of the paper refers to. But I appreciate that could be a little bit clearer. The other thing which I would just say is that although there is a link with regards to kind of a higher prevalence of domestic abuse being identified in more deprived areas, that's sometimes a little bit contested, as obviously we know that domestic abuse can affect anyone from any background, and we also don't know what extent confidence or likelihood of reporting domestic abuse varies by deprivation, so we kind of need to be careful as to what inference we might draw from that in particular. And the other thing which I think poses a little bit of a difficulty for us within all of this is that the crime surveys reports on intimate partner violence, whilst it's showing little change in prevalence across the piece in the last few years, what we don't know is what the impact has been throughout lockdown, throughout COVID, because it is not responsive enough to be able to tell us that right at this moment.
Did you want to come back, Councillor Edwards, or are you content with the response?
No, well, I think there's something to be worked on here in terms of understanding relative rates of domestic violence compared to other areas and regions in the country. I think there's something to be worked on. I mean, I would just say one of the things that struck me once, I saw a young man really being quite aggressive with a young woman. They were arguing over a phone, I think, but in the end, I felt compelled to report it to the police, and I was really struck at just how much more seriously the police were taking it than I'd rung it in, and it made you realise, yeah, no, this is right. And when eventually friends of the woman came to join her, they said, they acknowledged just how important it had been to ring it in, and I think there's a sense in which we all have to take a step up and say, look, if we see something, you ring it in, because this behaviour needs tackling, and needs tackling when you see it. And it was a bit of a shock, really, when I realised what I've got involved in, just by picking up on a small, what seemed like a small incident, and actually, no, this behaviour was wrong, and it has to be stopped, and stopped early before it develops into something worse.
Thank you very much. I have Councillor Inglis and then Leslie Dolby. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think whether it's for Emma, possibly, just looking at the repeat demand on victims, we're looking, it's been a stable 33, 34% over the last few years. Now, I know sort of domestic violence, it is a course of action. It's perhaps not always the first time when people do phone that in. So really, it's what is in place for those repeat victims, and why are we still maintaining those same figures? There doesn't seem to be any improvement on those. And I'd suggest they're probably the higher risk people. Is it a case of they're withdrawing their complaint, or they're non-compliant, or there is a shortfall in the systems? So really, what can we do to address that? Well, it's a stable figure. And it's highlighted a couple of weeks ago in Stapleford. It's not just women that are the victims. We had that incident in Stapleford a couple of weeks ago as well. So really, the question is really, I'm waffling a little bit, is what are we doing to address that stable amount of figures rather than improving it?
Thank you. I believe, I think it's about 18 incidents before a victim on average will report it to the police in the first instance. And that's very much why we're trying to obviously provide that kind of additional support, not just through the police and through kind of criminal justice angles, but also, the helpline has been the broad part about the broad focus of what we've been talking about today. But that is about trying to provide those additional options for those people in those circumstances, so that they know that there are different things which they can do, and we will support them if they want to call the police, and that's an avenue which they want to explore. But equally, if it's not something that they want to do, there's other support which is available to them. I noticed, that Craig put his hand up at this point, and so I'm assuming that he wants to make a specific response to this. So I thought I would bring him in at this point before anything else.
Thank you.
Thanks. Rob, not all the same people. Obviously, we also abide by a 12-month repeat definition, which lots of other forces don't, let's say. And the other thing I would just add to that mix is that the repeats get a real close focus through the arrangements that we've got on reviewing the incidents in public protection. And 33% is, in my operational opinion, quite a healthy position compared to lots of other forces, let's say.
Thank you very much. Did you want to come back, Emma? Or?
Yes, sorry, thank you. There was just one other thing which I wanted to flag. The other thing which I wanted to highlight is the additional initiatives which I've already mentioned today to try and support those who are either reporting an incident to the police. The domestic abuse car I mentioned is about having that early intervention, and those people that you mentioned, Councillor Inglis, that perhaps decide that they don't want to kind of continue down a criminal justice route, by having that kind of early intervention support there from an officer experienced with dealing these types of things, but also from a domestic abuse worker, so that again they can either be supported at that early point to explore criminal justice avenues, or alternatively at a minimum to explore what their potential safety options are and how they might be able to escape from the relationship itself. And then the other thing was just around the perpetrator programme. We recognise that providing survivors with support in crisis is incredibly important, along with the prevention work that we do, but we also recognise that for some repeat incidents, it might be that there is a single perpetrator who is perpetrating against multiple victims, and therefore by providing an intervention with those individuals, whether it's through the IOM scheme that we've got in place, whether it's through the perpetrator programme which we've just introduced, to try and work with those to prevent them from being repeat offenders, is a really important intervention which we need to explore, and which is why we've put the funding behind it as well.
Yeah, that's lovely. Thanks both for clarifying that. And it's not going against the excellent work that has been done and the improvements being made. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I've got Leslie Dolby and then Councillor Smith. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I wonder, is any work being done to take the perceived stigma out of men reporting domestic violence?
Can I come straight back on that? Sorry. Thanks, Christine. So yes, I think it's important to highlight the incredible work that Equation does locally as our commissioned service for male victims of domestic abuse. I mean, you're absolutely right that they are an underrepresented group, and they were identified as such along with other particular communities throughout the work that we've done on this paper and beyond. When you get an opportunity to see the Violence Against Women and Girls strategy, you'll also see that we take notice of the fact that although the Home Office definition recognises that violence against women and girls includes men and boys don't necessarily identify with a violence against women and girls strategy. And for that reason, the approach that we've taken is to have a separate addendum effectively, which allows us to take due attention to regard and have an opportunity to explore the concerns which are identified by men and boys in this particular area. I think it's also just worth highlighting that in the current funding bids that we've put into the MOJ, some of that includes particular work with men and boys in this area as well.
Thank you. I think it's interesting to know that you keep saying boys as well, because I think in schools you sometimes see some of this bubbling under, but thanks for that.
Councillor Smith, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Most of my question has already been asked and answered, to be honest. It was in relation to repeat victims. I know in some councils, like at Ashford District Council, for example, we have domestic violence coordinators that work alongside the police. In areas where they have got those officers, are you noticing that it is beneficial compared to areas that haven't? Does all council areas across Nottinghamshire and the city have one of those officers?
Thank you for that, Councillor Smith. So you're right, it is a bit of a mixed picture across the county in terms of areas that have domestic abuse coordinators and those that don't. One of the things which I think it's really important to highlight is that, as many of you'll be aware, the domestic abuse bill that's currently going through Parliament comes with the associated statutory footing for accommodation-based services, which is associated with the main local authority, so Nottingham City and Nottinghamshire County, the primary authority, sorry, in that sense. And there's been funding which has been released associated with that. in addition to the funding that's gone to the primary authority, district and other local authorities, sorry, have also had a chunk of money which has been made available to them to support the work that they're doing in this particular area. I know that conversations are ongoing with the DSVA at the moment as to how we can have a strategic approach to that for those areas that, as you mentioned, don't necessarily have domestic violence coordinators at the moment, but also is that other areas which are kind of identified as having potential gaps at the moment. For example, sanctuary, which I know has been an issue for some local authorities as well. So I think there's a real opportunity actually for us to have that kind of strategic conversation at a county level involving all kind of the local authorities that come under that umbrella as to how we can make that as effective as possible.
Did you want to come back, Councillor Smith?
No, perfect. Thanks for that, Emma.
Thank you. Mr. Bob Vaughan Newton, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just a comment. And these figures are about 10 years old, so the world may have moved on. But I can recall seeing some analytical work that was done in the South Nottinghamshire area, which was Broxtowe, Gedling and Rushcliffe boroughs, comparing the rate of reported domestic abuse related crime. And the three boroughs had more or less very similar population sizes. They were each about 110,000, I think, at the time. Only 22% of the reports came from the Rushcliffe area. Broxtowe and Gedling were very similar, around 40% each. But it struck me as being Rushcliffe being a much more affluent area than either of the other two boroughs. Whether there was some kind of under-reporting owing to not wanting the neighbours to know what was happening, or whether there was a genuine lower level of domestic abuse in Rushcliffe, I don't know. As I say, that's about 10 years old, but it might be something that somebody clever like Dan might be able to have a look at.
Thank you. Did anyone wish to come back on that? Emma or?
Yeah, if I can just come back briefly, Bob. Thank you for that. I think that's really interesting, and I'd be really interested, as you're saying, to see if that's something we could explore, because I think it builds off some of the comments that Councillor Edwards made as well. I think it's difficult, isn't it, is that we know that there is potential, that there is more reporting in those deprived areas, but as you say, is that a consequence of there actually being less, or is that a consequence of perhaps people not reporting it in the same way? And I don't think we truly know the answer to that at the moment. But I think all we can do is really underline the fact that we know that domestic abuse can happen whatever your community, whatever your background, whatever your affluence, if you like, in that case, and just that if someone does report, that they will be believed and they will be supported in every way that we can.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I've got Suma Harding. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Emma. I was just reading the report and it is very comprehensive. There's one area that I'm quite interested in the fact that you mentioned that you're working with health agencies and the third sector. What progress have you made with them?
Thanks, Suma. So to be honest, the report on progress that you've received is where we got to. We had a meeting with health colleagues earlier in the year, at which point they made some general commitments, in which the commitment was really to consult on what had been put in with the report in terms of what they would like to do in taking it forward. There was absolute recognition that when we were having the conversation, which was at the back end of January, early February, that they were experiencing significant COVID pressures, and that would inevitably have an impact on the amount in which they were able to participate in those discussions at the time. Now that we are touching wood and fingers crossed and everything, hopefully coming on to the other side of that demand that they've been experiencing from COVID, we should be able to pick up those conversations again and to see exactly what they'll be able to commit to in terms of how we take this forward.
And Suma, perhaps, as Paddy, perhaps I could just add one word to this. Some years ago, the Health Service did quite a lot of work with GP practices. Because of financial pressure, that work was ceased. We made a bit of a fuss about it at that time, but as Emma has rightly said, as we hopefully get the NHS back to normal, that's the kind of discussion that we want to pick up, because for many women, GPs are an acceptable point of contact.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. And also, Emma, I know there's DVPOs, but there's also restraining orders for repeat offenders of domestic violence. I don't know if we have any figures, but it would probably be interesting to know about them too.
Thanks, Suma. That's certainly something that I can take away and seek to get you the figures on.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I can't see any other hand raised at the moment, Emma, so I'll seek this opportunity to ask my question, I think. You said very early on about the domestic abuse car and the work that they're undertaking. And also previously at this forum, we've also heard about the mental health assistance that goes on. And I guess my question is about whose responsibility is to kind of liaise between the two, because we know that quite often perpetrators and indeed many of the victims may have mental health issues as a consequence of this. And I just wondered how and who is responsible for drawing those together.
So we have an outstanding officer who does the triage work. I won't name him in person, but he's been with the triage work right from the beginning. And I know that there'll be discussions with him about linking the two schemes together. I can see Craig wants to perhaps help me by giving name, rank and number.
Over to the Chief Constable, I think.
Thank you. Yeah, the sergeant on the team is well aware of that, and it really does help by having the nurses in the cars, because their system access on their laptop is, as you know, unique. So that really does help with the problem solving side of things. But in any of the two sort of disciplines, if you like, there is for all our staff an obligation around the safeguarding. And in completing the safeguarding form on their tablets, on their phones, etc., the referral goes through to the multi-agency side of things, and then that gets funneled to the right lead agency, as it were. So that works quite seamlessly. But if it's something really dynamic, the work of the sergeant on the mental health team is something to behold, really. It's really good.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that. I think I saw Councillor Abraham's hand. Is that right, Councillor Abrahams? You'd like to come in?
No, nothing to add there. Sorry.
Did anyone hear that? I didn't.
No.
Andy said that he didn't have anything to add.
Oh, right. Thank you. It's just it didn't. I don't think any of us heard his response. Thank you very much.
Very quiet.
Yes, thank you. Any other questions or queries at this point? Has everyone felt that they've had the opportunity to have a good dialogue with the Police and Crime Commissioner's Office? Thank you very much, Emma. Then in that case, can the recommendations please be agreed? And can I thank you very much. I'm seeing plenty of thumbs and hands. Can I just check whether any votes against or any abstentions? No, thank you. Then in that case, that is carried. Thank you very much. So that takes us to item 6, the Police and Crime Commissioner's Update Report. So prior to handing over to the Commissioner to introduce the item, I would just like to formally move the recommendation, which the Vice Chair will second.
Formally second recommendation, reserve the right to speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Commissioner, over to you to introduce this item.
Well, Christine, thanks for that. Let me start with something that's not in the report because it occurred after the report was put together, which is the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Bill, which is a monster of a bill that runs to 200 pages. When I was involved in Parliament, we used to call it a Christmas tree bill because you can hang things on it. And there are lots of good things in the report, but there are some difficult things in the bill. Perhaps I'll draw attention to a couple of them. One is around travellers and the illegal occupation of a land. There's a problem here. I'm not sure whether the bill addresses it properly. Secondly, there's a series of measures around knife crime and increasing the ability of the police to stop and search people who've been previously convicted of carrying a knife without any evidence, I think is controversial. And we'll work on the bill, and there's plenty of time to see it through. I don't think it will get royal assent till about a year from now. But the bit that's catching the headlines at the moment is the campaign around Kill the Bill. Councillor Edwards talked about the vigil by the Robin Hood statue a fortnight ago. I have to say, it went. The police didn't want it to happen. Let's be clear about that. It broke the COVID restrictions. There were a lot of discussions about how it should be policed. At the end of the day, things went remarkably well because those attended were respectful and acted in a very responsible way and dispersed when they were asked to. And I know there's a difference between what happened in the Market Square and the previous night at Clapham Common. But the image that sticks in my mind is of a female officer lighting a candle at the end of the vigil, a Nottinghamshire officer doing that, compared with some of the symbols and images that came out of Clapham Common. Craig may want to comment around this in a minute or two, because I know he was asked to give evidence to the House of Commons Home Affairs Select Committee just last week, and his views are important because these are operational policing matters. We were all concerned over the weekend about what appeared to be a big demonstration on the forest around Kill the Bill. I have to say, because the force and myself has got good relationships with the organisers, there's a lot of preparatory work done. And fortunately, again, events on Saturday went without any real serious slightly on some of the events of the evening. But the essential point is this: the death of Sarah Everard, and we've talked about this earlier on in the meeting, gives us an opportunity for change. We talked about misogyny. We're just, we'll let the panel have it, produced today a report on how women feel on our streets at the night time. And it's clear to me that there's an awful lot needs to be done, and as the lockdown unlocks, we'll see the nighttime economy growing again, and the kind of casual and not so casual abuse against women and girls in the town centres and city centres will continue again. So I'm in some discussions with the National Police Chiefs Council, the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners, about how we can use the present climate to move forward, and I'm determined to do that, and I think this is a chance to act. I just want to make couple of other big points, really. First of all, in the report, there's a short analysis of part 1 of the Police and Crime Commissioner's review. I said to the panel before, I didn't expect major surprises in it, and there aren't. There is one recommendation that the panel will be interested in, which is doing some work which I'm very keen on, and I hope to be involved directly myself around promoting the best practice of panels. And I'm always very boastful when I talk about the work that we do here with the panel in Nottingham and Nottinghamshire. There's a good and strong relationship. Sign of a good and strong relationship is it's a challenging relationship, and that must be right. One of the things that is going to take place is a further discussion with the Local Government Association and the Home Office about how we can promote best practice of panels. Apart from that, there's not a lot in the report that people didn't anticipate. In the slightly longer term, I think we will see a change in fire governance. There's a fire reform white paper promised after the election in May. Ultimately, that may have some consequences for the panel. There's a report about having a designated deputy. We have an unfortunate situation in Cleveland, in Durham, where the commissioner died, and somebody has been acting up for getting on for 2 years now, and that clearly can't be right. So it gives us the opportunity to move things forward. There's also a discussion around part 2 of the review, which is greater involvement of PCCs in the local criminal justice system. One of the big challenges at the moment, one of the big risks going forward, is delays in the courts, particularly the Crown Court, and both Craig and Emma might want to comment on that. We've made a bit of progress. We've got a Nightingale Court up and running here in Nottingham, but it's only for 3 months. And are we going to resolve the issue within 3 months? Certainly we're not. So more involvement of PCCs in the local criminal justice scene, I think will happen in terms of administration, in terms of probation reform, Christine, and both you and I go back a long way on this and made our views very clear at the time, and there's a belated recognition that things need to change back, but have they changed back sufficiently? No, I don't think they have, and I think there's a discussion to be had, and pleased to have colleagues from the county and city council on around youth justice and youth offending, which is a really important issue and one where I think we can make some more progress. So those were the kind of things I wanted to talk about. Just say a little bit about the budget. We're 3 or 4 days away from the end of the financial year. On the revenue side, I think we will come in with a slight overspend, but not a very significant overspend. The budget this year is about £217 million. I would anticipate an overspend of about maybe £1 million. Part of that is driven by the bringing back in-house of vehicle maintenance of Vensons. It's proved slightly more costly than we thought in the first year, but will make significant savings on the contract over the next 3 to 5 years. So I'm not unduly concerned about that. We've got a big capital programme running. I was at the new custody suite, which is in Linda's ward, or close to Linda's ward, just last week. We'll begin to mobilise to open it in July. It'll make a significant difference, not just for people who are accommodated there, but for staff who work there. And I know some of you have had the opportunity to go around the existing Bridewell at the moment, and it's clear that it needs change. Perhaps in passing, I could say that we have now disposed of the existing Bridewell. It's going to the court service, which is what I'd always wanted, and I'm delighted we've been able to achieve that. I'm also delighted on the terms of the contract and the price that we've got for it. So I think it's been a good solution always round. The new headquarters building is coming on well. It's on time. I think it will come in under budget, and just reflecting some of our earlier discussions around violence against women and girls. We've got a new SARC at the design stage. It will be accommodated not far from the existing one. The plans are really good. I hope we'll be able to move onto the ground fairly quickly. There's a bit of an issue around costs at the moment, but we're working hard. But for a new facility like this, I'm really keen that we do an excellent job. So the final point I wanted to make was about the headline messages that run throughout the report, particularly in the appendices. In a sense, what it says is that police numbers are up and crime is down. The panel know that up to the 31st of March this year, over the previous 2 years, we'll have recruited 260 officers. Next year, because you've approved the budget, an extra 100 officers there. Most of them are on the front line, and Craig may want to comment on that. I know he's talked with you around this before. We've increased visibility. There's a nice section in the report, and we'll publish some figures perhaps next week about the success of the Reacher teams. All of the Reacher teams have done slightly different things, which it must be right, because they're a resource for the local neighbourhood inspector to be able to reach out and work with local people on issues that affect them. So visibility is up as well, and satisfaction rates are going up too. Crime's down. We're near the end of the financial year. We'll publish figures almost imminently, which suggests that crime in Nottinghamshire, partly because of the pandemic, but not solely because of the pandemic. Crime was going down before lockdown. Crime will be down in Nottinghamshire about 22%, vehicle crime down 28%, burglary down 25%. And the bit that makes me really proud is the work that we've done with partners. It's not all the work of the police by any means around knife crime. Knife crime down here about 11%, going up regionally and nationally, and it's been a remarkable piece of work with partners. These are life and death situations. It's a situation that we've talked about in relation to domestic violence earlier on. And I know, I think it was Leslie mentioned the case in Stapleford. Craig may want to comment on that. He'll want to be very careful about what he says about that incident, because it's still being investigated and going before the courts. So I appreciate, Christine, there's an awful lot in the report. More than happy to take any questions. As always, if it's an easy question, I'll take it. If it's a difficult one, that's what we employ the Chief Constable for.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Does anyone want to start the ball rolling? Obviously, there's the main report. Then, as the Commissioner said, there's a whole list of appendices for information, and of course the performance report as well. I think I can see Councillor McRae's hand. Thank you, Councillor McRae.
Yeah, hi there. I don't know if it's so much a question. You know, I'm like, I waffle on half the time, don't I? But I think first, it's always important, as I always try and do, to thank the police. We've definitely had our money's worth. I mean, still keep coming if we need you. I'm not saying don't, but we've had a lot of police in Stapleford. The Reacher team, I would absolutely love to spend a day with them. I know we can't at the minute because of the COVID thing. Anyone that's been watching the police interceptors on Channel 5, my back garden was on there actually, but they're doing a cracking job. and it was really nice to see up in, is it Ashfield? And I won't say the police officer's name because that's not fair, but it's, if I say young lady, and she'll probably thank me for that, I think she's a sergeant up in Ashfield way. I actually trained her up as a doorman, so to actually see her on telly doing policing, and when she said like there was raiding a house for drugs, and she says not in my area, I thought, yeah, good on you. And I've never been so proud to see a police officer that I actually trained up as a door supervisor, so she's doing really well, so that was amazing. The amount of youth work and youth engagement that the police are doing, again, brilliant. And to read it in this report, there's some cracking stuff. And also, as Paddy says, it's not just the police. There's lots of groups and organisations out there. I won't say any of them because I don't want to look like I'm supporting one more than the other. But they're all doing cracking work, and there's probably lots that we don't even know about. So fair play to all them. You mentioned earlier about something being controversial about stopping people that's probably been done for having knives before. I'm all for that, because if they get stopped and there's a possibility, all right, they might have learnt a lesson and be a nice person, and let's hope they do. It's good in everybody, but they might still be carrying, and if you pull them up and they've got something on them, you've just saved a life. So if anyone says that's controversial, they've obviously not been affected by it, because it isn't, and I hope it does happen. And then thirdly, it's just more of a concern. Perhaps there's a question in it. I don't know. It says knife crimes down, and that I see a lot of arguing, and I'm made aware of it on social media because a lot of people are inside at the minute, and it worries me that as lockdown's starting to loosen, and I hope it does, because we all want to get back out, don't we? Who doesn't want a pint in the pub? But it just worries me that some of these people are going to come to heads. And I'm sure the police are ready for that, but it really worries me, because knife crime is horrible. Even if it's one person. I've been working with a family whose son was murdered, and it's probably one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. But I just, you know what I'm like, I get all emotional and all that, and I can't help it, because I just think it's wrong. But is that something that the police are worried about, that as people start coming out again, I know you're on the top of it all and all that. I just wondered if it's a bit of a worry or a concern. And I know it is with me and a lot of my residents as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor McRae. Thank you.
So, Richard, I would never accuse you of waffling. Now you've told us about the Interceptor piece on TV and the view of your back garden. We'll have a look at the state of your back garden and pull down the recording to see whether you spend enough time in the garden. I'm going to bring Emma in because she spoke to Simon Riley, the local inspector, who I know, Richard, you're in regular touch with. I know there's a meeting amongst partners about Stapleford, I think on the 12th of April, and Emma was very much involved in pre-discussions around that. In terms of lockdown coming out, there is some indication that in July of August of last year, as lockdown eased, that violence went up. All forces, including Nottinghamshire, have been asked to put a plan together. So after Emma, I'll ask Craig to talk about the planning that he's doing.
Thanks, Paddy. Yes, so we had some briefings with the neighbourhood inspector today, just ahead of the Stapleford Action Group meeting, which is at the 12th or the 14th. Forgive me, I can't quite remember. But we've been discussing, and as you say, in response to the incidents, the tragic incidents that have taken place in Stapleford over recent months, I know that yourself, other councillors and partners have all been working really closely with the police to support them, to help kind of identify the key issues that are taking place there and provide any intelligence that might support them in the work that they're doing. And I'm sure I don't need to tell you, but the Reacher team's obviously been out there, the neighbourhood team's been tasked there. We've got Operation Larkspur, which is really focused on tackling the issues at the heart of there, and also we've announced the additional funding to hopefully provide some additional security, some assurance, some target hardening, which will be able to work with the community and with the neighbourhood inspector to make sure that that's best utilised and is the most effective that it can possibly be.
Thank you. Paddy,
so over to Craig.
Yes.
Right, just collecting a few of those questions together. So I think first and foremost, with regards to the unlock, yes, Richard, we've done quite a lot of advanced planning. We've given an update to a joint ministerial task force, which was police, courts, Home Office and education together with health. And we did that as a partnership, so ourselves, local councils, but also that included a lot of the elements around youth justice too. And you asked how the knife crime picture is evolving. I mean, one key accomplishment of the team effort that's gone in is we have less knife crimes per 1,000 population than the national average, even though we have a core city within our boundaries, which I think is a significant achievement. And also, I think it shows just how important the recruitment piece is, and we've kept it going through COVID because we've now got 2 knife crime teams, one in the city and one in the county, and I think that works really well for us. And then the other sort of bits to link in with regards to the efforts around the Reach team, I think they've obviously seen a leap in performance, and in particular around us potting drug dealers, which is a local priority. So it helps us with the you've said, and we've actually delivered and done and fed that back. And that helps get the intelligence coming back into us as well, around not only the drug dealing, but other serious crimes. So only last week we recovered another couple of firearms. And although gun crime is down, quite thankfully, we are still recovering firearms proactively. And I put a lot of effort into making sure that that serious end of the business is taken care of as well. And then I think the final couple of points, just to link some of the earlier questions together, are that the overall performance is tracking probably around minus 22%. And I know Paddy will be wanting to say some things about that at some stage. I think nationally, that's probably about double the crime reduction performance. And the thing to draw out is that the individual outcomes, the positive indicators of restorative justice, charge, caution, summons, etc., they have actually increased slightly. So crime down, but the positive outcomes are going in the right direction. So all very good news with regards to feelings of safety, but also that overall sense of performance in the right direction.
Thank you very much. Thank you. There's probably some more coming your way, I suspect, soon. We've got Councillor Ellis and then Councillor Edwards. Councillor Ellis, please. I think you're mute, Councillor Ellis.
I'll try again. I've got a couple of comments or questions. Page 35 talks about the Venson contract and the overspend of, I mean, on the face of it, a 7 million overspend looks a fairly significant figure. I appreciate there's more behind that, and there's possibly things that you can't tell us because of commercial confidentiality. I just wonder if you could say a bit more about that. Is that a national contract? Is it just something locally? Just like to understand that a bit better. And I'd like to echo, second part is to echo the comments that people have made about the policing of the Sarah Evard vigil locally and the police crime bill protest. I think it's very creditable on behalf of the police, and in the same way as we say London doesn't represent the rest of the country, I don't think the Metropolitan Police represents the best of the police. You know, policing by consent and policing with approval. But I noted in Appendix B, there's talk about the body-worn videos, and I know the panel has been supportive of this, both to protect officers, provide evidence, but also to show what happens, in a sense, to protect the people who get engaged with police officers. I have a question for the Chief Constable, but are you happy that the body-worn videos do give protection for other members of the public? Thank you.
Thank you.
So let me start, David, and then Craig will come in on the 2 second points. The Venson's contract is a contract between Nottinghamshire Police and Vincent's, and it involves the supply and maintenance of police vehicles. It was done at a time where it was said that PFI was the only show in town. It's always been clear to me that if you buy something on the Never Never, it costs you more, and the Vincent's contract has cost us more. We've been negotiating for about 2 years to come out of it. The cost of buying out is in the report. I won't go into the detail here because there are some commercial considerations. The significant point is that the vast majority of the extra cost was met by way of government or Home Office special grant, and we were asked not to make a big fuss of it. The costs of bringing it in-house over the past 3 months have been slightly higher than we anticipated, but the savings in subsequent years will be higher than we anticipated. So we've got a break-even point on this contract of about 3 years. So I'm very confident that we've done well on that. We have another PFI, which is the building at Riverside, down in the meadows there. Mike Edwards will know the building well. Again, we're coming towards the end of that PFI contract. There are some discussions going on, both within the force with me, but also with the Home Office and the Treasury about where we might go with that. But again, with good planning, good professional help, I think we can make savings on this. I was very interested in your comments about the demonstrations. I think in fairness, we ought to ask Craig and Rachel just to talk a little bit about their view of the world. As I said, there's been a lot of discussion between us about the best way forward, but ultimately these are operational matters for the Chief Constable. Perhaps Craig might just take up the invitation I made earlier on about talking with you about his audience before the Commons Home Affairs Select Committee. And finally, on body-worn video, I think it's really important. All our frontline staff now have access to it. It provides security both for the officer, but more particularly for the general public. We have a panel that can review body-worn video. We need to review and strengthen that. We're doing that at the moment. But Craig, perhaps you just fill in the details a bit about demonstrations and body-worn video.
Yeah, will do. And apologies for missing it off. So, yeah, we got asked at short notice to give some evidence to HASC. And predominantly, I think that this is fundamentally about, I think, your preparation, your engagement and your leadership. We've got a good number of experienced public order commanders, and 2 of which are sort of on this call at the moment. So Rachel and I have been around this for a long period of time. And the key thing is, with regards to the protest, it was very obvious to me that the protest was going to go ahead anyway. But we have some good intelligence gathering and some good community links, which give us links into groups, which help us make that sort of assessment of what the picture is likely to be. And then we plan accordingly. And just because somebody is likely to break the regulations doesn't mean that we stop talking to them. So we keep engaging all the way through, try and determine the numbers, obviously mitigate the risks wherever we can, possibly with distancing and with masks, etc. But at the same time, to try and sort of identify a sensible opportunity during whatever congregation it may be called, that we can sort of politely ask people to disperse at the right time. And the look of the feel is probably the most important aspect from a command perspective. You know, the last thing you want to do is have everybody kitted up in the public order stuff, and you would always see from us a sort of neighbourhood-led approach, nice and sensitive, engaging, talking, you know, being prepared to listen, even if the topic is quite controversial. And then really, in reserve, we would have a contingency based on that intelligence picture that came towards us. And quite often, in giving those parameters with regards to the look, the feel, and our approach professionally with our experience, you tend to get the frontline cops making more of the right decisions. So there's a time when you need to go hands-on, and there's a time when you can allow things to flow, let's say, and you have to be respectful and work with people. But obviously, if we get, you know, as in the weekend, we had an element which hasn't been reported at this stage, but I will share it with you because we have been asked a question via the post, which was during this weekend's event. There was 20 or 30, let's say, problematic football supporters that arrived, completely sort of off-piste, as it were, but they were quickly contained because of some of the cops that we had and their tactics and their experience, issued a ticket and dispatched to back up the north of the country from where they came, so they didn't enter that particular protest environment, let's say. So things like that are important, that we're able to be fleet of foot. But the fundamental principle is we keep talking, we keep engaging, keep developing that intelligence, and we put a contingency in place that should we have to act in a way which appears more forceful or more aggressive, then we do that sensibly and proportionately. So that's probably all I need to say around that. And obviously context comes into things too. You asked, Paddy, about body-worn video, and I'll just endorse, you know, a lot of the spending that we've been doing is on the IT. We've just done a big refresh. We got on the back of a nice contract that Lancashire Police led on, so that enabled us to buy some brand new body-worn video. All the frontline cops get one issued. It's on personal issue on response, which is great. It docks, it downloads, we keep it in a big cloud system. It's great for the cops, but it's also great for the public because it does add to that trust, and particularly if you're reviewing a stop search encounter, of which about 85% of hours are captured on that. It's really handy from a sort of leadership perspective, so you can get an appreciation of context and conduct. So I think it works really well, and it's good for the court as well, because it's evidence taken at the time. I'll just pause there.
Thank you very much, Craig. Thank you. Councillor Ellis, did you want to come back? Because this emanated, I think, from your question.
No, I'm happy with that. I suppose the only other thing that body-worn camera video does is it makes good television, doesn't it?
It does indeed. Yes, many of us are avid viewers. Thank you. I've got Councillor Edwards and Councillor Woodings next. Councillor Edwards, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I have a list of points. First of all, on policing demos, I have in the past complained about certain demos taking place, and I have listened very carefully to what the Chief Constable has said, and I've taken them on board, and rather pleased previous months about his answer, because I think it applied well in his response to the vigil and his response to what's happened Saturday. So I think it is good to come to these meetings and to listen and learn as well as just pronounce. Can I say, from the point of view of Operation Reach, a real sense of progress in the Meadows? Again, you'll know I regularly come and complain about things and things not going right in the Meadows and what have you. Absolutely plain that the Operation Reach has made a big impact in people's sense of confidence in the Meadows, particularly in our shopping centre. Yes, that Channel 5 programme, I've now watched it now because an arrest of two brothers in a Meadows household took place and was broadcast on Channel 5, and that led to 2 jail sentences. So just a sense of, you know, we had one situation where this drug dealing moved on because of the action the police were taking, and a new complaint was made, and within a week the police had sorted it. And then only last week somebody complained on the Thursday about drug dealing on a new location, and an arrest was made the next day. Now, I shouldn't think the Chief Constable will want to promise that kind of response all the time, but it is really, really reassuring and pleasing when we see that kind of response. I noticed the report talking about having the freedom, the capability to address new priorities, including the situation with dogs. And when a young man came up and asked my partner whether she could hold her dog but without the leash on, Oh, crikey, you know, there's a fashion and a trend going on here. So again, I think thumbs up to Notts Police that they've decided to give that some priority and some action. Can I ask a question which I think I've asked in the past, but perhaps through channels, perhaps not at panel meetings, and that's regarding our approach to speeding over 20 miles an hour. There seems to be a notion around that because you can't get a course if you go speeding over 20 miles an hour, but you can get a course if you go speeding over 30 miles an hour, that the police are therefore much less inclined to actually try and book or enforce 20-mile-an-hour zones. I wonder if there's a misunderstanding here. I wonder if there's potentially a bit of a myth here, but I just wondered if the answer to that is not known, whether that could be addressed, because I've asked it 2 or 3 times now with various officers and not had a reply. And we have found that the 20-mile-an-hour thing has had an impact on people's behaviour generally, and it's been good for the city. But we want to do a little bit more about seeing enforcement done, and I hope there isn't some kind of misunderstanding taking place. On the riverside, it's usually the tradition of a ward councillor to protest at the chance of any risk of a closure of a police station in his ward. The riverside is an absolute exception to that. There is a real sense of it's not in a good location. The purpose of it is not clear. PFI, in this case, has worked badly. I've got to say, PFI worked very well for us on the trams, but it's not clear it's worked well for us on this police station. And please do all you can to make it work for the people of Nottingham. On the capital programme elsewhere, can I ask about the £500,000 that's been taken away from IT and directed towards car parking for staff? Paddy was a minister when 20 years ago I was chair of transport, and he used to come to Nottingham and tell us what a magnificent job we were doing on the local transport plan, because we were shifting people away from using cars to using public transport, walking and cycling. And it does seem a bit of a shame that we're spending £500,000 on improving people's ability to commute to work by car. For some time now, the tradition in Nottingham has been to encourage travel planning. I just wonder if that £500,000, whether it needs another look to say, is that really worth it? Is there not more can be done with travel planning or encouraging people to live closer to where they work? Thank you for your patience on those points, Chair, which went from points A to F. You'll be glad I didn't reach H. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Paddy, do you want to come back?
Yeah, yes, Mike's had a long-standing interest in the policing of demonstrations, and we need to recognise that we may approve of some demonstrations, we may disapprove of some demonstration, but the responsibility on the Chief Constable is to allow people to meet and protest in an orderly kind of way, whatever the background. Really pleased with what we're doing in the Meadows. We have a new neighbourhood inspector for the Meadows, someone who's come up through the police force, and I think he's going to make a real difference in what is a really tough area to police. Clifton, Meadows, Wilford, Sneinton, and St Anne's. It's a tough ask, but he's up for it, and Craig may want to comment on that. Emma will, of course, want to comment on dogs as the leading dog expert in policing at the moment. I'll bring her in a moment. On the capital programme, the car parking is at Sherwood Lodge. There is a bit of a travel plan. People are encouraged to come together, but because of shift systems and the rest, it's really difficult on that site to go to a greener transport system. But we work hard, Mike, on Byron House. There is no designated car parking at Byron House. It's very close to the tram. I know a lot of officers and staff come to Byron on the tram. And in terms of IT, we've shifted spending, and because of your background, Mike, you'll recognise this from spending or classing IT spending as capital into revenue spending, because the turnover of equipment is so great at the moment that it's better and more sensible to put it in the revenue comment the column than in the capital column. But as the report indicates, at various points, we're going to have to increase spending on IT, particularly on the airwave radio replacement. A lot of work's being done on this at the moment. It's a real risk area. In terms of 20-mile-an-hour limits, these are primarily close to schools. Most schools in the city and county have got a problem of parking morning and evening. We're very keen to work with partners around this. It's not something that the police can resolve by themselves by any means, but there's a good, strong working relationship with the City Council and your community protection teams around safe parking at schools. So I'll stop there. I'll send Emma to the dogs, and then Craig will come and help us. Emma.
Thanks, Paddy, and thanks, Councillor Edwards, for the comments that you made around the initiative that we've done in conjunction with Nottinghamshire Police around dog theft. I mean, it was a fantastic opportunity actually to be able to demonstrate how we could really engage and listen to the community concerns that were out there at the moment, and how that can kind of translate and shape the way that policing is taking place in the area. And we were able to announce it a couple of weeks ago, and we obviously announced a new chief inspector who is going to be taking the lead in this particular area within the force, and already she's been working really hard to develop those links locally with partner agencies and local organisations, so that we can have that kind of local strategy in place, so that we can respond to the community, reassure the community actually on a lot of this, but also support them with regards to crime prevention, whilst we've also been able to and something I've been able to take more of is a bit of a national conversation around how we might be able to, again, taking those kind of responses from the community. And it's worth mentioning actually that the survey that we did and consulting people received nearly 20,000 responses on this. It was an issue which clearly people felt very strongly about, and so we've been talking about how we might be able to better protect people through legislation and with potentially stiffer sentences. And we've had a really positive response to that, as well as the response that we've had locally from the community and from people across Nottinghamshire. We've also managed to get the backing of the Kennel Club, of Blue Cross, of PDSA, Wood Green, Battersea Dogs Home. So they're really keen to support us on this in an area that, you know, I'm really pleased that we're able to take the lead on. Excuse the pun.
And Craig, you pick up from there?
Yeah, so the new inspector, because James has been successful in getting a secondment as a temporary chief inspector, which is really good for him. So the new inspector down there is Carl Thomas, local lad from Radford, and he previously has been a DS on the robbery team, so comes with quite a good pedigree in terms of crime investigation for that side of the city. And with regards to the 20 and 30 mile an hour thing, straight cough, I don't know the answer to the question, Mike, but I'll find out for you and get back to you.
Thank you very much. Did you want to come back, Councillor Edwards, before I move to another councillor waiting?
Just to say, I think unusually Paddy doesn't quite understand what's happened with 20 mile an hour zones. All of the meadows within Meadows Way is now a 20 mile an hour zone, and I have a vague idea, Linda might help me on this, I think that's more widely spread across the city as well, and we have moved on significantly from school only approaches, and then of course it means roads like Robin Hood Way and Victoria Embankment before we close the through traffic, funnily enough. That's actually solved that, but the Robin Hood Way is quite a challenge. Thank you, Craig, for just saying, yeah, we don't know. If we just get to the answer on that, really, because it is confusing police responses, both in public meetings. About a year ago, I had this question, and also in current conversations. And we are planning to expand 20 mile an hour zones further, because the thing you want to do if you're improving safety is get the speed down. And one point thought I did think I had on that is I wasn't clear why there was a reference to a loss of revenue on road safety in the report, which but then an implication that somehow that didn't mean that you didn't need to do as much, provide as much road safety service as a result. Traffic levels is about 70% of where it's been, and I would have thought that would have enabled some savings as well as loss of revenue from certain fines and what have you. So I thought there was a bit there, it was a bit vague. But thank you, Chair, and thank you to my colleagues for the answers to the questions.
So Mike, Craig's going to come back in. We'll have a look at the 20-mile, 30-mile issue for you, and we'll write to you about that. You mentioned Victoria Embankment. I was there yesterday. I know the City Council are consulting on making the traffic measures controls that you've got down there put on a permanent basis. I have to say, you've got my vote.
Thank you. I think you wanted the Chief Constable to come back and comment, didn't you?
Yeah, just in relation to the enforcement side of things, sometimes that the income, how it's described in the report, it does go in cycles. But you're right, the numbers of vehicles on the roads has reduced considerably, and so has some of the tickets. So that's only going to be a short-term issue. But with regards to the overall level of enforcement, from our perspective and the vans and everything else, the resources are unchanged, Mike. It's a good level of provision, and you can still book on a neighbourhood basis all those little enforcement vans as well. So each of the inspectors has access to booking those over and above their sort of default locations on the hotspots.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Councillor Woodings, thank you. You've been waiting a while. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I just want to say that in Nottingham, all side roads are 20 miles an hour. And I think we're looking to extend and have a city centre area of just 20 miles per hour as well to really slow traffic down, because we want to encourage people to get back on their bicycles effectively and encourage children to walk to school as well. And additionally, there's a Safe Streets project pilot, which is looking at clearing cars away from around the gates and the immediate vicinity of schools to give a better visibility for children and parents crossing the road. And so that's another pilot that's taking place at the minute. I just wanted to just pick up on the courts backlog, because I appreciate we've got this Nightingale court for 3 months, but I don't know if we've had any predictions or projections about what difference that will make to the courts backlog. Obviously, it's a matter of great concern that victims aren't getting justice within a reasonable time period. And I don't know if we've yet had sort of any predictions or forecast about what difference that might make. And I think if it does work, there might be we might be able to make a case to say, look, you've cut into the backlog by this much, and therefore, there's a case to extend this for another 3 months, perhaps. And then just on the performance report, I was just looking at page 52 of 72, which shows that we've had an excellent 999 response over the last year. But the 101 number, abandoned call rate, has increased. And it says it's attributed to the COVID-19 pandemic, turnover of staff, and the impact of training new starters. Now, I do know a little bit about this because the chair of my really excellent TRA, her daughter is waiting to start in the call centre. And I know she's had her training course deferred at least twice now. But I just wondered what the recovery plan is effectively to get the staffing back to the levels that they should be and improve the 101 performance.
So, Linda, there are a number of points there, and Emma and perhaps Craig will comment on the courts. In terms of the aspirations of the City Council for the 20-mile-an-hour zones across the city, I think we better arrange a meeting offline to have a discussion about this. I mean, there are clear implications for policing. I'm very keen with what you've said around school gates. They are really dangerous points, morning and evening. And I know when tomorrow I go and pick my grandkids up for that fabulous Nottingham Academy, I feel as though I'm taking my life in my hands at times up there on Greenwood Road. So let's have a discussion offline on that. On 101, the service is up for recommission later on this year. If you remember, 101 was going to be the gateway into all public services, not just the police. It proved too difficult at that time, and there's a discussion going on at the moment about what we are going to go out for tender later on this year, and I hope we can improve the service. There have been difficulties in the control room. We've not had the problem that they had in North Yorkshire, where because of COVID outbreak, the control room was closed down, but we have had to segregate and distance staff, and it's been really quite difficult alongside implementing a new control room system. But the new headquarters will have a new operational suite for taking calls. I think we are in a position to go forward. Craig might just want to help me a bit on the recruitment of staff at the moment, but let's go to Emma first and then to Craig.
Thanks, Paddy. So yes, so with regards to the position with the courts locally at the moment, I mean, as has been made, as has been referenced, sorry, we've got the Nightingale Court, which is open near, well, just outside the city centre to help with the backlog. In addition, it is worth mentioning that we're expecting Crown cases to also start being listed in Mansfield pretty imminently once the additional kind of building improvement works that were due to be made. I think it was to the airflow system to allow it to be COVID compliant are completed. So that's kind of any day now stuff. The other thing that's worth mentioning, although it's not within Nottinghamshire, but Loughborough are expecting a venue to be opened which will allow for multi-hander cases to be heard there, and that is going to be to the benefit of the broader region as opposed to just Loughborough. And given kind of that Nottingham has been more of an appropriate venue for multi-handers previously, but spread across those multiple courtrooms, etc., it has meant that yes, multi-handers have been able to be heard at Nottingham. It has meant that it's been at kind of the expense of quite a lot of space and quite a lot of being able to do anything else there, to be quite honest, at that time. So that's helpful as well. So those are all really positive steps and positive progress. That being said, the Nightingale Court at the moment is just for 3 months. We haven't been provided with a trajectory or a set kind of target as to which HMCTS are hoping to reach by the closure of the by the end of those 3 months, rather, as to what they hope to get to at that point. So I think you're right. There's definitely going to be a case going forward as to saying, you know, actually that this is something that we need on a longer term basis or for an extended basis beyond those 3 months. Just also to mention as well, though, that discussions with HMCTS are ongoing, and I know that they are all working very hard to do what they can in terms of addressing the backlog, and they are intending to come to the next meeting of the Police and Crime Panel to give an update as to where they've got to with those improvements, what that has meant, and where we go to next in terms of tackling the backlog at that point.
So Craig, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, just briefly on the 101s, etc. I think we were very much challenged last year with having to split the control room 3 ways. Then we had some COVID outbreaks as well within the control room. We kept going. We also now can take a 101 call remotely, which is one of the byproducts of COVID, which is positive. Probably the reason for the delay in coming on board is that staffing's good, Linda. So we deliberately recruit and we staff it about 105%. So what I can say to the panel is that certainly post-Christmas, we've hardly dropped any calls at all. But there's a time lag effect because it's a 12-month rolling data. So, you know, I've seen the today one and it's a really decent picture. There's hardly any been dropped. I can sort of count them on, you know, a couple of hands really. It's that good. And in particular, the response times on picking the phone up for a 9 is just where we'd want them to be. It's been absolutely prioritised all the way through.
Thank you very much. Can I check then if any other members have any queries or points to raise at all? I don't see anyone's hand up. In that case, can the recommendations be agreed, please? And I'll just check if anyone has got any abstentions or any votes against it. Councillor Edwards, I can see your hand. Is that to support the recommendations? Sorry, you're muted. I assume yes. In that case, then, can I just check that no one else has got any comments? No, then in that case, thank you. That debate is carried. That leaves me just to remind all colleagues that the next meeting is scheduled for the annual general meeting on the 7th of June. I'm mindful that this is a sort of stop point for as far as we're concerned in terms of moving to an election period. So at this point, may I thank the Commissioner for all his support and being very willing to give us all sorts of papers and different ways of helping to understand the complicated processes that there are now involved in police and crime commissioning, and thank his team. And can I wish you and all the members that are involved in the elections over the next few weeks, wish you all well, and we'll see hopefully some of you, if not all of you, back here as soon as that's over in June for the annual general meeting. And if that's the case, I'd now like to close the meeting and thank you all for your support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You'll be as pleased as I am that as we move through March, the days are getting longer and we're starting to see a bit of spring coming through and some warmer days. And with that, it's fantastic, isn't it, to be able to get outside a little bit more and to enjoy the open air. But it's really important that as we do that, that we also keep in mind all of the measures that are in place in this very first step of the roadmap. It allows for us to meet up with one other person for recreational activities outdoors. But it's really important that even as we do that, we keep in mind all of the social distancing measures, which are so important. The reason they're important is that there is no shortcut we can take to the end of the roadmap. There is still quite a long way to travel, and during that time we need to make sure that the rates in Nottinghamshire come down further. You can play your part in that by sticking to the rules at each step of the roadmap.